At first, I thought it was just bad luck, a missed opportunity, an unexpected setback. But when I received that rejection email, everything changed. I knew it wasn't just a coincidence. My stomach dropped as I read the words on the screen. After careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with another candidate. It was for a job I knew I nailed. I had the experience, the skills, and the passion. I was confident. I felt I was perfect for the position, and in the interview, I could see the hiring manager's interest. I'd answered every question with clarity, provided examples that showcased my strengths, and my enthusiasm had been contagious. I was already imagining myself walking into that office, setting up my desk, meeting my new coworkers. I'd finally get the recognition I'd worked so hard for. But this rejection felt personal. Too personal. I stared at the screen for a long time, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How could I have messed up? What went wrong? And then, almost as if a light bulb had switched on in my head, I remembered. A week before the interview, my old friend, let's call her Emily, had reached out. A simple text. We should catch up soon. I'll be in town this weekend. Emily and I had been inseparable in high school. We were the perfect duo, the popular girls, always in the center of every group, always invited to every party. But as the years went on, I started to notice that things weren't the same. Emily wasn't the one people turned to anymore. Her charm, her popularity, and her hold over everyone had faded, while my life had started to take a different direction. I didn't think much of it at first. It had been years since we'd really talked, but when she reached out, I thought maybe we could reconnect. I didn't want to hold on to the past, but I also didn't want to be the one to completely cut ties. So, I agreed to meet her. But when I showed up, there was something off about her. She was as charming as ever, of course, always with that sweet smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She was no longer the girl who lifted people up. Now, she seemed to get pleasure from tearing others down. Her compliments felt loaded with something darker, and her suggestions about my life, my relationships, and my work were always oddly critical. She'd say things like, "Are you sure that job is the right fit for you? Or maybe you should think about what you really want. Maybe you're just too ambitious for your own good." I shrugged it off, though. Old friends drift, I thought. People change. But as the weeks passed, things started to unravel. I began to notice the odd patterns. It was subtle at first, nothing I could really point to, but then I started seeing a clear connection. The job opportunities one thought I was landing would suddenly fall through, and I could feel her presence in the background. She would always be there, casually mentioning something about how a friend of hers was the one who got the job I'd been after, or how so-and-so had been promoted instead of me, even though I was the one who had been working harder. And then came the rumors. Small things, like people who used to reach out to me suddenly pulling away. I would hear whispers about my ambition and how I was hard to deal with. It was strange. These were people I had known for years, and now, suddenly, they were turning on me. But I didn't put it together. I thought maybe it was just the pressure of my career making me paranoid. But when I got that rejection email, the pieces clicked together. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't some random cosmic mistake. This was Emily. She wasn't just a friend who had fallen out of touch. She was quietly working behind the scenes to make sure I didn't get ahead. She was using her charm to manipulate everyone around me, spreading lies, sowing doubt, making sure I was always one step behind. It was more than jealousy. She wasn't content to simply be unhappy with her own life. No, she needed me to fall too. She wanted me to be stuck, to feel the same frustration she was feeling, to watch me fail so she could somehow feel better about herself. I had been so blind, too focused on my own life, too willing to brush off the red flags. I told myself she was just a friend, that she didn't mean any harm. But now, it was clear. She was out to destroy me. The rejection email wasn't the worst of it. It was only the beginning. I kept telling myself it was just bad luck, but every day it felt like I was sinking deeper. My career, my relationships, even my own confidence were unraveling, and I couldn't figure out why. At first, I tried to brush it off, just one setback, just one disappointing encounter. But when it kept happening, over and over, I couldn't deny it anymore. There was someone behind all of it, and that someone was Emily. As the days passed, the manipulation started to become impossible to ignore. First, it was the job rejections, each one more humiliating than the last. The promotions I was supposed to get went to people who didn't deserve them. I remember one meeting where my boss, who had always been supportive, casually mentioned how Emily had suggested someone else for the role I'd been eyeing. My blood ran cold. She was still getting in my head, using her charm to twist things behind my back. Then came the personal life sabotage. The man I'd been seeing, who had seemed so perfect for me, started pulling away. I couldn't understand it at first. He'd been affectionate, interested in the future, but suddenly, he was distant. I tried to reach out to him, but every time I called or texted, it felt like I was being shut out. When I asked him what was going on, he just shrugged and muttered something about me being too intense and needing space. It didn't make sense. But when I found out that Emily had been inserting herself into my personal life too, it clicked. She had been whispering doubts to him, just like she had done with my friends, my colleagues, anyone who was close to me. The whispers weren't just rumors. They were calculated attacks, carefully designed to destroy everything I had. And it wasn't just the relationship. It was everything. My social circle shrank. People I thought I could trust started avoiding me. I felt like I was being pushed into a corner, like I was losing control of my own life. But the worst part? I couldn't even figure out how she was doing it. She was always just out of sight, always managing to slip under the radar, but the damage was clear. That's when I decided to confront it. I had been ignoring the signs for far too long. I had been too trusting, too hopeful that things would get better on their own. But the truth was staring me in the face now, and I had to face it head on. I started going through everything: text messages, emails, old conversations. It was all right there, the pattern of manipulation. She had been slowly poisoning my relationships with lies, half-truths, and carefully placed doubts. She had been working behind the scenes, making sure that anyone who got close to me would eventually walk away. I had let her control so much of my life for far too long. But that was it. I couldn't let her win anymore. I took everything I had, every email, every text, every screenshot, and put it together. I made a decision. I was going to take legal action. I didn't care how uncomfortable it would make me, how much it would cost. I had to protect myself. I needed to stop her before she completely destroyed me. I contacted a lawyer and started the process. The idea of going to court, of standing up to someone who had once been my best friend, felt surreal. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew it was the only way to take back control. It wasn't just about stopping her from messing with my life. It was about taking a stand for myself, showing that I wouldn't let anyone manipulate me anymore. The legal battle wasn't easy. It was long, it was exhausting, and there were moments when I wondered if it was worth it. But when I finally got the restraining order, when I saw the judge sign the papers, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but it was the beginning of the end. I blocked Emily on everything: phone, email, social media. I cut her out completely. I wasn't going to let her get in my head anymore. After the restraining order was in place, things didn't magically get better. In fact, in some ways, they got worse before they got better. Emily, predictably, didn't take the court ruling well. She tried to contact me, calling from new numbers, sending cryptic messages through mutual friends, even trying to leave things at my doorstep. At first, I was scared. I felt trapped in a situation I thought I'd left behind. But I reminded myself of one thing. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. Each time she tried to reach me, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had made the right choice. It was hard not to feel guilty. Old habits die hard, and we'd shared so much together, good and bad. But this wasn't about loyalty anymore. This was about self-preservation. Every time she reached out, I filed a report. I kept every voicemail, every text, every single message. And it wasn't long before I saw how desperate she had become. She would show up at places I frequented, just coincidentally, running into me, trying to start conversations. There was one time, I was out with a friend at a coffee shop, and Emily walked in, acting like it was nothing. She came over to our table with that same sweet smile she used to wear, like everything was fine, like nothing had happened. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the anxiety rising, but I stood my ground. I didn't let her see me falter. She sat down, casually trying to make small talk, but I didn't engage. I wasn't going to play her game anymore. "Emily, I don't want to talk," I said, my voice firm. "You've crossed the line. I've had enough." For a moment, she looked genuinely confused, as if she couldn't understand why I was doing this. But then the mask slipped. Her eyes narrowed, and I saw that flicker of anger she used to hide behind her charm. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this." It hit me like a punch to the gut. For so long, I had been afraid of her wrath, afraid of what she might do if I stood up to her. But in that moment, as I watched her walk out of the cafe, I realized something. I wasn't scared of her anymore. She didn't have that power over me. In the weeks that followed, things started to calm down. Emily's attempts to reach me became fewer and farther between. The restraining order was working. But the emotional toll of everything, of realizing how deeply I had been manipulated, of losing someone I had once trusted so much, was still there. I wasn't whole yet. I took a break. I started therapy, something I had avoided for a long time, and began focusing on rebuilding myself. I had to face the reality of what had happened, the manipulation, the lies, the slow destruction of everything I had worked for, and learn to trust myself again. I also distanced myself from others who had allowed Emily to influence them. It was painful, but it was necessary. And then, slowly, life started to feel a little less heavy. I focused on my work, and with the support of those who truly cared about me, I began to rebuild my career. I took on new projects, ones that challenged me in ways I had never imagined. I learned to say no when something didn't feel right. I learned to set boundaries. Part 4. It wasn't just my career that changed. My personal life began to shift as well. The relationships I had neglected in the past, the ones that had started to feel strained because of Emily's sabotage, began to heal. I let people back in slowly, cautiously. I was careful about who I allowed to influence me. But over time, I could feel my trust in others growing again, just like my confidence. And I realized something important. Sometimes, when you're faced with someone who's determined to destroy everything you've worked for, the best thing you can do is cut them out of your life completely. It's not easy, and it's not without consequences, but it's necessary. Emily had taken so much from me, my career, my self-esteem, my peace of mind, but the one thing she couldn't take was my ability to rebuild. And that's exactly what I did. It's been months now, and though I'm still healing, I'm stronger than I was before. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to the people who truly have my back, and most importantly, to never let anyone manipulate me again. I've set boundaries that protect me, not just from Emily, but from anyone who might try to take advantage of my kindness, my trust, or my vulnerability. It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to value myself in ways I never did before. As for Emily, I haven't heard from her since that last confrontation in the cafe. There were a few odd instances, like a message left by someone who claimed to be a mutual acquaintance, asking if I was okay, or if everything was really over. I ignored it. I blocked all the numbers she had used to reach out before, and that felt like a final act of closure. It was tempting to wonder if she would ever try to reach out again, if she would show up at another coffee shop or send one last text. But as the weeks and then months passed, I realized something. I didn't care anymore. I used to think about her all the time, what she was doing, if she was thinking about me, if there was any part of her that regretted how things turned out. But eventually, that faded too. The obsessive thoughts, the anxiety, the guilt of what happened, it all started to feel distant. That feeling, the one of being shackled by her influence, slowly dissolved as I focused on myself. I finally understood the importance of not knowing what she was up to, of not caring about her narrative anymore. It's strange, you know? The more I distanced myself, the more I realized how unhealthy that dynamic had been. It wasn't just the lies she told or the rumors she spread. It was how I had let myself become wrapped up in her world, unable to see the truth. I had been so invested in trying to keep the peace, to not rock the boat, to maintain this picture-perfect friendship that I had allowed her to dictate so much of my life. It wasn't just that she was manipulative, it was that I had let her be. And that's a lesson I'll never forget. But here's the thing. As painful as all of this was, I'm grateful for it now. I wouldn't wish the pain or the betrayal on anyone, but I know that this experience made me stronger than I ever could have been without it. There's a version of me that would have stayed stuck in that toxic friendship for years, pretending everything was fine. But I'm not that person anymore. It took a long time to recognize how much of my self-worth had been tied to her approval, to her opinions, and to her constant validation. She had always been the center of our friendship, the one who determined our direction, the one who made the decisions. And I went along with it because I thought that was what friends did. But I now realize how damaging that was. It took me months to unravel that false sense of worth I had built around her, but once I did, I felt lighter. I had to learn how to stand on my own, without needing her to define me. I also had to learn to trust myself again. For so long, Emily had convinced me that my instincts weren't reliable, that I was too sensitive, too easily offended, too quick to jump to conclusions. She had convinced me that my judgment was flawed, that I wasn't seeing things clearly. But the truth is, I was seeing things clearly all along. I knew something was off from the start, but I allowed her to make me second-guess myself. I let her twist my reality. And so, the most difficult part of all of this wasn't just cutting her out. It was learning to trust my own voice again. I don't just mean trusting my gut in situations like that with her, but in all parts of my life. The choices I made in my career, the relationships I nurtured, the way I interacted with people, I had to rebuild the foundation of confidence I had lost. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Some days, I still doubted myself. I'd look at someone else's success or someone else's confidence, and I'd feel that pang of insecurity again. But now, I know that comparison only holds me back. What Emily did to me doesn't define who I am now. I had to stop seeing myself as a victim and start seeing myself as someone who could overcome, who could rebuild, who could do it all on my own. And rebuild I did. Slowly at first. I started small, focusing on work, getting back to the projects I had abandoned or put on the back burner. I took on new roles that challenged me, stepping out of my comfort zone in ways I never would have dared before. Every new success, no matter how small, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I no longer needed Emily's approval or validation. In fact, I didn't need anyone to approve of me. I was doing this for me, not for anyone else. I also began to reconnect with people, those who had truly supported me and believed in me through all of this. It wasn't easy, rebuilding those connections after all the damage Emily had done. She had poisoned so many of my relationships, and in some cases, I had to cut people out of my life who had been swayed by her lies. But I also found people who stood by me, who believed in my truth, and were willing to let me heal. They helped me rebuild trust, not just in others, but in myself. There were still hard days, though. Days when I'd think back to the good times, to the moments when Emily had made me laugh, or when we'd spend hours talking about our dreams. And I'd feel a pang of longing, the feeling that I'd lost someone important. But then I would remember what she had done, how she had tried to tear me apart, how she had twisted everything to suit her narrative. And I would remind myself that those good memories had been built on a foundation of lies. And in the end, they were nothing more than that, a facade. And through all of this, I learned something invaluable, that sometimes the most important relationship you can have is the one you build with yourself. No one will ever protect you like you can protect yourself. No one will ever love you as fiercely as you can love yourself. And once I truly understood that, once I truly understood the power of setting boundaries, I became unstoppable. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Emily will ever come back into my life, or if she'll ever stop trying to manipulate people. But I do know this. I will never let anyone, not her or anyone else, take away my peace again. I will always be the one in control of my life. I'm not the person I was before. I'm stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I've learned that it's okay to walk away from toxic people, even if they've been in your life for years. It's okay to say no. And it's okay to put yourself first.